Welcome to the Love Your Inner Athlete podcast, your go-to source for all things mental fitness in sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or parent, you will learn as you join us to dive into inspiring conversations with those who have worked to develop their mental fitness. You will hear from people who have put in the work as either an athlete, coach, or a parent. In each episode, we bring you discussions and expert insights on developing resilience, focus, and mindset. Discover the concepts of mental fitness and learn how to use it to create consistent, durable confidence in both sports and life. I'm your host, Hans Schulstad. Let's get started. Welcome to the Inner Athlete podcast, where we talk all things mental fitness, how to get better, how to be a great hockey player, great athlete, more importantly, great person. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Pat O Leary, former Minnesota Gopher and national champion, state championship coach, all-around great guy. Pat and I have gotten to know each other over the years, worked with several of his teams, both in good times and in bad, and so it's great to have you on today, Pat.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this. Obviously, this is something you learn about over time, and like to help out and the importance of it. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, tell me about winning a national championship with the Gophers. What was that like, and what do you remember most about that run?
Well, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, it was in our hometown of St. Paul, which was pretty cool. I don't think a lot of people can say that. And, the core group of guys that we brought back, our senior class, which, the way everything's going in the world right now with transfer portals and kids leaving early and all that kind of stuff. We had our 6 seniors that made it through. I think we had 9 when we started and stayed throughout the whole process. And we're kind of the driving force behind that team, which, that group of guys we speak about it a lot and are very proud of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was just the camaraderie we had, going back to how it is, with how we got there. I mean, we were a good team that year, but super close-knit group of guys with the coaching staff as well, and battled through some games. And even if you look at, how it ended up with, winning the semis, in a 1-goal game, and then obviously being down with 1:30 left in the championship, scoring a goal to tie it with the goalie pulled, and then, winning it in overtime. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember. I was at that game with my dad that night. Yeah, my aunt and uncle too. It was electric in there when you guys scored.
I know. I sometimes, you have a lot of people that I see that have, gotten older now, and they can always remember that night. And when you're in the mix of it, I think sometimes you forget, how cool it was. And, some of the cool stories I tell about it are, we came to warmups that night. There was 16,000 people in the stands for warmups. People just wanted to be there early, didn't want to miss the puck drop. And then I kind of watch videos of it, here and there of the last goal or the tying goal, and they do a really good job of, panning the stands. And it was pretty cool to see all the Gopher jerseys and the fans in there. Obviously, like I said before, it was in our hometown. So having kind of a home game, for those 2 semifinal and final games was pretty special. I had a lot of family and friends there too, which was really great.
Yeah. How many of the guys on that team have become coaches of some kind? I know Leo is coaching. You are.
Kowalski is doing some coaching. Johnny Pold is the AD and coaches at Hill Murray's girls team. Patolny coaches in the AHL. He coached in Northern Michigan for a little bit. What's funny about it is a lot of the guys, aside from coaching high school, or college or pro or wherever they do it, I run into a lot of those guys. I have a U10 daughter. They all have daughters. I see them at the rink coaching U10 hockey or, peewees and bantams and so on and so forth. So it's fun to see them giving back to the game, and which is exciting.
Tell me about the high school team that you coached that won a state championship, and what made them different, and how were they the same as that Gopher team?
First and foremost, they were a very talented group of kids. You have to have that obviously to win. But same thing we said before, it's same as our team before. We had some senior leadership, and when it comes to the senior leadership portion of it, there was 2 or 3 kids that were really good hockey players that were up for awards that year that maybe went on and played Division I or Division III, but there were also a couple of senior guys that year were, Division I soccer players or, high-end athletes in different, part of it. We had a couple that went to the military. So it was a very interesting mix of, personalities and work ethics. And so it was really cool to see them come together at the right time, and kind of the same concept that we talked about the championship team for the Gophers. We were good that year, obviously, that 2016 year, but it came to the right head at the right time, and we're playing super good and got some luck, and it was found a way to win it.
Yeah, that was fun to watch, fun to be there.
That was
especially knowing you so well and knowing your staff so well after so many years. Really gratifying to see that. And I remember the first year you went with Sam Maka and those guys, and that was definitely where you started to build all of that. And that's where I think that all started. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree 100%. I think the biggest thing about it is, and I speak to other young coaches now in the high school ranks, that, obviously what their ultimate goals are, to get their team to the state tournament, besides the obvious things. But, that's kind of what I talk to them about all the time is you never know, and you never know what kind of team you're going to have. And, everything comes down to one game. But that group, I think what you have to do is, set some sort of belief within the program, of your culture or whatever the case may be. And sometimes it doesn't even come to fruition where you're going to make it, but, you set those foundations in, and, the kids believe in it, and, hopefully they get rewarded at some point to get there. But yeah, those things are very important. And, that belief when you come the first day of practice that you have the opportunity to be good enough to make it to the X, and who knows after that.
Yeah. So how many years have you been coaching now?
This will be my 15th year coming up. So
Wow.
as the head coach, and I coached 3 years under Carl Davis at Wayzata as the assistant coach.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I coached 2 years at 2 or 3 maybe at Orono High School as well. So my first getting into coaching was when I got done playing minors in 2005. I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach, but my friends and coaches still coached the Armstrong at that time Bantam A team. And I just started hanging out and going to games and going to practices and loved it. And that was kind of the start of it, and knew I wanted to do that for the rest of my life.
A lot of coaches say like coaching is way more than X's and O's. And it's a lot more about managing people, managing kids, managing yourself. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, it's 100% accurate. I mean, I think if you just get done playing the sport at a high level that you've been competed at for a long time, and you're very competitive and been on top of it, if you are a part of a winning culture, when you're young, you don't realize how important the thing that you just talked about was. It's just, what makes those teams so successful. I think, what I've learned over time is just the process of the season. And I talk about it all the time. I think the biggest fundamental that you need to put in is like, do you have guys and girls around you that are, in the same belief system that you are when it comes to development? And then on top of it, do you have a coach that's good with many different things, the logistics of the season? One of my coaches is really good at dealing with the health and the mental part of the game, as a teacher, just having other people around you that can take some pressure off you. But I think the biggest thing is just getting your process set and understanding that, the day-to-day grind should be fun, and I think over the last probably 5 years, that's really set in with me a lot. Now that I have kids in sports, it's just, I enjoy going to the rink every day and interacting with the kids, and you get really frustrated or very excited after a win or a loss. But, if your kids are excited to come to the rink on Monday and, talk to them about how school's going and what we're going to do for the next week, it makes it very enjoyable throughout the year.
So let's talk a little bit more about like the human side. So one of the things that I think really built and made the relationship we've had over the years become so strong and special is all the, it's unfortunate, but all the tragedies and adversity your teams have faced, starting with the Jack Jablonski injury and your player passing away as suicide, and that whole group also having to deal with the Patrick Schoonover stuff. What'd you learn from those experiences?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I have a tendency to have to go back and think about it sometimes, just because I feel like we're in such a hurry all the time to get to the next season or whatever the case may be. And the learning piece of it is you learn when you're doing it, obviously. And I think the biggest thing that I personally learned, it kind of goes back to what we said before, is having guys like yourself or having your coaching staff or your AD or just friends around that you can lean on to have conversations with. They might not have the answers you're looking for or even have never been a part of it, but being good humans, like understand what it's like to go through something like that. For me, it was just, like I said, leaning on other people, being close with the people that are closest to the people that were really affected during those situations. And, from there, being able to be a sounding board for if it happens to somebody else. Don't be afraid to give me a ring and ask how you deal with it. Like I said, I might not know the answer as well, but going through it does give you the opportunity to have some experiences that, whether you like it or you don't, it happens in the world. And, just taking care of the kids first and the families and trying to get them to talk if they want to talk. And if they want to, just making sure they're okay basically on a daily basis. And that just goes. And I think what I've also learned is that goes for the coaches and the families that aren't, directly, impacted by it. Those people are around those friends and families as well. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, was just learning how to talk about it and ask questions that some people don't have answers for, but at least they're listening to you and care about what you maybe are going through.
Well, I remember I was sitting outside my sister's house, getting ready to go in to sand the floors for her. She had just moved in, and your number showed up that day. And I remember answering the phone, and you said, "Hans, I need you to bring your A game on Tuesday. Something bad just happened." And I had already known about it.
Yeah.
And I hadn't quite put two and two together, but I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't think I've ever told you this. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you think back to that time, was there something, any of those incidences, was there something that I said or did that really stuck with you or changed your perspective?
Well, I think the biggest thing that you've done for me in any of those circumstances was basically just being able to calm it down for a second and just be like, let's figure out what the situation is immediately, which is probably the hardest thing. But what people don't realize is, the steps that it's going to take for everyone to deal with it. Because it's an ongoing process, so if it's instantly let's figure out how we're going to get through the next week, or let's figure out how we're going to get through the ceremony, or, whatever the case may be. Then it's okay, let's unfold the next layer of the onion and what it's going to be like in a month or 2 months or the next season and so on and so forth. So that's what you help me the most with, and being able to understand that no brash decision right now is going to change anything or do anything, really positive or really negative. It's just taking it day by day. And like you said, communicating with people and here's the steps that you might take to make sure that, you're making people feel as positive as they possibly can through a horrible situation.
As all that stuff is going down, or when I've had other situations like that, I got to compliment you on the fact that anytime I've ever called you and said, hey, can this coach or this person contact you about how to handle this or that, you've always said yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a trust situation, obviously, first and foremost. But then second of all is that is also me allowing myself to understand that my capabilities as call me whatever, mentor, coach, whatever has its ending at some point, right? And everyone's learning at some point, but you have to be able to use the tools in the friendships and the acquaintances that you have to make the right decision. And that's still what I do today.
Yeah. Well, and over the years, many of your players have told me that they really feel like you handled those situations really well.
Thank you.
The other thing that has come up, because, I ran into a lot of your assistants when I was the hockey development coordinator at Armstrong, where one of the things that a couple of them have said to me is, in retrospect, you guys couldn't have talked about it too much.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I think that, circa the last 3 or 4 years, I think that makes more sense to people right now. Give it between 8 and 20 years ago. We talk about this all the time, right? It's the stigma, so on and so forth. And that's a real thing, and people say it and, talk about it, but you don't know until you don't know. Right. And so easy answer to your question is yes. One thing I'll piggyback on that, which is all of our faults, is I also think that we have a tendency to text a lot more right now than we did 25 years ago. So that makes it a little bit easier to communicate on things like that, but it doesn't make it better because you're not visually talking to somebody and seeing their emotions. And, and I think that might have something to do with it as well, as if you have to sit down and talk about it face to face, it gets a little bit more emotional, and but you also get to see the people's real thought process on it and what they're going through. And if you know a person and you're looking and talking to them face to face, they're dealing with something, or they are super excited about something, or maybe they need some help.
Yeah. And I agree with you on the texting thing, because, the thing that I think we learned from the pandemic was that connection really matters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it is really important. The other thing that I also remember from those experiences is all of the kids. And as you remember and know, like, I worked with both teams in that accident, and the feelings were exactly the same in both sets of rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember you telling me, do whatever you can, because it was about the kids.
Yeah. And I think that part of the puzzle is basically meaning like that's us as adults trying to get help too, and understand that like, we're not qualified for this. Can you please help us understand what the kids are going through? I don't know. Because I don't know.
You're right. And most people don't know. And it's just a hard thing, whether it's a coach dies, like happened at St. Michael several years ago, or, someone on the team dies, or a coach dies, or there was a goalie coach that got hurt this year, right? Hit his head in practice or something. Someone took him out by accident.
One thing I was going to tell you, that I don't even know if I've ever told you this. Maybe I did or I didn't, but how I got the position at Wayzata. Have I ever told you that story?
I don't remember this story.
Okay, so Carl Davis is a good buddy. That was his assistant coach within his staff. Had a tragic accident, and he drowned in a boat fishing or doing. I don't know the exact details on it, but that summer of before I got the position as the assistant coach. And so the reason I bring that up is at that time I was obviously very sad for him and the family and everything like that. But unless you're going through those type of things or have somebody that has, I've thought more about that over the last 15 years, and what did Carl go through during that situation? He's like, I got one of my best friends that, lost his life, so on and so forth. And he had to fill the position with somebody else. Nobody cares about the position, I mean, people do, but sometimes you forget like how that came to fruition. So yeah, so it's been a lot of that one didn't directly affect me, but pretty much. And that's how, you start learning those things.
Yeah.
Experiences.
Yeah. What's it like for you to coach as a parent, and how has being a parent of young athletes influenced the way you coach?
I've talked about this a lot in regards to, when I say this at the beginning, every time at the beginning of the season, we have a meeting with our families, and what I say to the parents about how we operate, how we're going to take care of their kids and all those kind of things has never changed internally, but it's definitely changed externally, because that's one thing I always hit on. I'm always like, well, now that I'm a dad that has kids with or without it within sports, has really changed the way I've operated with how I am on a daily basis, keeping tabs, if you want to. I know that's a very dumb term, but like on their kids, right? Like, and I always tell them like throughout the season, and it's, even including the summer with summer skates, like, and the parents always laugh, but I'm like, our coaching staff sometimes spends more time with your kids than you do, And so the reason I say that is like, now that I have my kids in sports, I take that very seriously on both sides of it. One, me and my staff being around these kids a lot and taking care of them. And then on top of it, knowing that there's other people that are doing that for my kids, and what do I want out of that from them? So it's a different perspective to have on regards to knowing how much time they put in, and do I want them to be hard on my kids? Do I want them to be honest with them? Whatever the case may be. And all those answers are yes, but it's just like knowing that they have the best, what's best for my kids, at heart. That's what I want. And so I take that very seriously when it comes to the kids that are on my team too, because I know there's other parents losing sleep over it, just like I do some nights too. So it's helped me a lot.
Wait, you're human?
Exactly. So that's the other thing I try to portray too is, you see a stoic person sitting on the bench in a big game versus, whoever, and everyone thinks that, we don't have emotions and stuff and things like that. So, and I don't think that that's what everyone thinks, but they just need to know that I go home and worry about my kids too and how they're being treated. So I make sure that's very important to me on how we treat their kids.
Yeah. So who were the best coaches you had, and what characteristics did they have that made them good coaches for you?
Well, my dad coached me in sports my whole entire life, which is a very weird dynamic for a lot of people, I think, just because how do you decipher okay, my dad's a coach and I'm not keep my eye on the ball and, so on and so forth. How do I separate that from go pick up your clothes? You know what I mean? So I learned that weird part of it early. But as we transfer, into like high school and college, I tell this story all the time, but Bob Motzko was my assistant coach when we won the championship, when Lucia was the head coach. And at the beginning of the season, my senior year, we knew we were going to be a good team and we had a lot of good leadership and so on and so forth. But after the kind of our training camp, if you want to call it that, Bob called myself and my teammate Eric Wendell over, who were both third, fourth line guys, role players, but kind of had a little bit of drive within the locker room and had the respect of the other players. And I think the coaches knew that. And Bob pulled me, I'll never forget, he pulled us into the penalty box at Mariucci and he sat us down and he was just like, hey, what do you think this team's looking like? And we're both like super good, obviously. And he goes, well, I'm going to tell you what. He goes, we're going to need you two to, and the rest of your seniors to be really big driving forces away from the scenes, meaning like in the locker room or on the bus or, kind of all that stuff. Aside from the playing time, obviously, and what you're doing on the ice, that's a given. And so that really gave me a lot of like confidence and / felt very important. So I guess the reason I bring that up is that's how I try to coach now as much as I possibly can, is just giving everyone in the locker room as much importance as I possibly can. I mean, we all know that there's the guys that are going to score 30 goals and that get interviewed after every game and, so on. And that's never going to change. But the other guys, the ones that are like driving force in practice or making sure everybody's dialed before the game, not messing around or making sure guys aren't late for practice, all that kind of stuff. Like the coach can only do so much when it comes to that stuff. So, he did a really good job of doing that for me. And I've used that over years of just trying as best you possibly can to keep everyone feeling as included / important as you possibly can. We know it's impossible, but it's an ongoing deal that I put a lot of prowess in that.
When you think about challenging coaches you've had or difficult ones, what characteristics did they have that were hard?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is if you're a 12-year-old boy or girl through however long you get to play sports, and, I think when you start getting over that age level, like the accountability thing becomes so important. And I think that's the ones that have been really good for me or hard on me or however you want to say that. That's been the biggest thing, is just the accountability thing, being there on time and knowing your role and trying to do what you're supposed to do as much as you possibly can, which we all know we're humans. So that's, I don't know what a percentage is, but let's say 75% of the time. But and that's what I've noticed from those coaches is just the accountability part. And I think the other thing that comes into play that people don't realize sometimes is when you're talking about accountability within the program is how do you find a way to treat the top end player or the most outgoing player the same with one that maybe doesn't play as much or is quiet. I guess I see that the most, not necessarily about playing time, but just they don't voice their opinion as much. That kind of stuff, and that's where the accountability really comes into play. So it's like, are you setting expectations for the highest level player, or are you setting expectations for the whole 50 kids you have or 20 or whatever the case may be? And I think that's the thing that makes that the most important is, the head coach has to have the full voice on that, but you have to be having the same message sent from the rest of your coaches, your school, your AD, everyone around has to be kind of pulling the same rope, which is a very hard thing to do, but it's a challenge that we all love.
So you've seen me present numerous times at Coach's Clinic and other places. What would you say your biggest takeaways are from the presentations you've seen from me?
I would say the biggest thing would be just how you evaluate yourself. And I'm speaking for, athletes or myself for that matter, from interaction to interaction or situation from situation, right? Like, how do you clear your mind on certain things? How do you not be drugged down into a rabbit hole of when you're not playing well? How do you control it when you're playing really well or you're doing really well in school? And how do you get out of it? That's the biggest thing that I've learned from you and what you've talked about is just how do you maintain some sort of level of consistency, right? And it's hard. And I think a lot of times what the different part of it that you bring to the table that is good for everybody, whereas like it's pretty simple for me to tell a kid, like, you have not been working hard every single day. Okay, how do we fix that? Whatever. But the problem is how do they see that and how do they change it? And if you don't have the ability to self-evaluate and everyone, does that differently, maybe I go skate a little bit more, or maybe I go shoot 1,000 pucks. Well, that's not for everybody. Maybe I need to go read a book or decompress, or, you know what I mean? Like everyone has a different way to deal with that. And that's the biggest thing I've taken away is just how do you decipher that? How do you get kids to understand that? And hopefully they can do it, which is better for the overall team concept.
So what would you tell coaches who are a little bit unsure about addressing these kinds of topics in their team? Mental health, mental performance, mental fitness.
Well, I think number one would be that everyone's starting to understand, and not that we didn't know before, but how much is actually going on in the world. So I think it's easier to attack that and rip that Band-Aid off with some people. What I would say is just the positive effects, let's put it that way, that you get out of this stuff is stuff you don't really realize right away. And learning the tools to be able to intimate conversation with like I said, that's a wide range of ages, but like the puberty range and the adolescence range of like when it's hard, and it's like if you're not trained to do that, there's two ways to learn. You have somebody teach you how to do it and do it with you, or it's experiences. And experience only comes with time. Whereas like this product can help you learn, not instantly because that's impossible, but like gives you the tools, to do it. So like for me personally, like I've had both sides of it. I've had worked with you and had done that and learned the tools that I'm consistently trying to continue to do, but I've also had the experiences. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I mean, I think I use it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So some coaches are often tell me that they're afraid that they're going to lose control of your team. Has that been your experience when we've talked about this stuff?
No, not at all. I think that when it comes to stuff like this is if you do it in the masses, meaning a squad, let's say, it's just like everything else. It's like when I go give my speech before the game, like 5 of them are listening to the whole entire thing. 5 of them are listening to none of it, and 10 of them are somewhere in the middle, right? And that's okay. That's probably what teachers deal with on a daily basis. But if you can have those tools to be able to pick apart a certain message that you're trying to get across to the whole crew, that's going to get to them. Or on top of it, more importantly, do you have the abilities and the tools to help the ones that like not publicly, but you can tell need the help, and make them more comfortable with having a conversation around that completely off the record. And that's kind of how I attack it moving forward. Is it's giving me the tools to be able to have a constant message throughout the program, but also on top of that, see the signs and, that maybe we need to have a little bit more conversations, not with a big group, on what you might be dealing with and a wide range of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've coached a lot of guys that have gone on to play at higher levels. What do you think separates the good from the great from what you've seen? And I'm sure you've played with good and great.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I can speak from experiences on both sides. Like as a player, God gives people gifts, and that's just matter of fact. What separates you from like getting to the next level is not only that, but also, I don't want to say necessarily work ethic, because like I think a lot of people have really good work ethics, but I think it's more of like a self-evaluation part. I think that's really separates kids as you're starting, the pyramid gets smaller. And what I mean by that is when you can self-evaluate, like maybe I do need to improve in this part of the game. Maybe I'm not doing as well in school as I possibly could be doing. Maybe I'm not, you know what I mean? Like just being able to be like, I have a little bit more in me. And there's some kids that do that know that, and just weren't maybe given the God's blessed, talent and are 6'5" that can skate and shoot. You know what I mean? Like, but they can find other ways to do it to curb that gap. But that's the biggest thing for me. Yes, you have to have a really extreme high work ethic, but you also have to be able to, as you get higher and higher and higher, like compare yourself to other people, but also be able to evaluate, why is that person getting an opportunity over me? Sometimes you just get opportunities because you're lucky, and that's fine. But most of the people that make it to the highest level have not only gotten the opportunities, but have some sort of, mental prowess that gets them to, like I said, self-evaluate, like here's where I'm lacking in skill or work ethic or all of the above. And I need to turn that page to see if I can, make one more step up.
So there's an art to coaching of delivering criticism and feedback, and yet knowing that like kids may personalize it. How do you walk that line as a coach?
That might be the hardest thing to do. I mean, number one is just, I coach a lot how I was coached and what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy. And that doesn't always mean it's right or wrong, but I've told you a couple stories about it, but also on top of it is a consistency of getting to know these kids and what their buttons are, right? Like, are they the kid that always, every time they come off the ice, they're staring at you for feedback? Is it a kid that always goes to the end of the bench and feels bad about themselves because they know that they did something wrong? I'm a true believer, and I talk to my kids about this all the time. Like, I'm a true believer that they know when they did something wrong. The thing that I try to do in my coaching staff as well is, okay, well, if we know that and we're showing you video and we're telling you after every shift and all these type of things, it's almost like you're just getting so much intel that you don't even know what you're doing anymore and you're playing scared. So it's like, for me, it's just, I try to figure out personalities over, abilities. Like, if you've been doing this for as long as I've been doing this, like, I know what the kids can do. I know who can skate. I can know who can shoot, all those type of things. But it's the next layer of the onion in regards to, like, okay, like we talked about before, after the game, you're sad or you're happy. What couple things do you need to do that will help you improve? And that some of them are physical, not all of them. I would say a lot of them are more mental, to be honest with you, of just what is your mental feedback on coming to the rink the next day, or did you have self-evaluation on how you played throughout that game or that month or whatever the case may be to help yourself, because they all want to get better and they all want to be good. Everyone wants to go out there and win and score a hat trick every single night, but it's like, how do we do that? And I think a lot of it is mental in regards to what I find the most in high school specifically is what their mental prep before the game. Like, are they doing anything visualization? Are they doing any kind of prep? Like, we can watch video all day long, but are you ready to go? And they're always going to be nervous. And I always tell my guys, it's like, if you're nervous, that's good. That means you care. But like, how are you dealing with that? Like, what are you doing in warmups to help you feel comfortable out there so you can play to your max ability? And that's hard.
I seem to remember you telling me a story where you were given the job of shutting down Danny Heatley. Is that right?
100% accurate.
Yeah. Tell me that story. And because I actually used that story that you told me, and I was sure it was you, but that's why I'm asking, of how you impacted that weekend, and it didn't have anything to necessarily do with your goals or your points.
Yeah. So I don't even know what year that would have been. It probably might have been my sophomore year. I don't know. But, Heatley was phenomenal, obviously. And he played right. He played on the offhand. So he played right wing. He's a lefty. And we did a left wing lock that weekend against him. And we were trying to match our line against him every single time. So I was put into the wolves den of trying to micromanage him throughout the game and so on and so forth. And hockey's hockey. It's not like a shutdown corner in football, but there is a way to kind of like take certain parts of the ice away. And that's what we were trying to do. And on faceoffs too, more importantly, because he was so good, like just getting to open areas. But so throughout that week, we were practicing what it would look like. I always joke about this because it's like, I said, we didn't really have anybody that we could put on the other side. That was Danny Heatley. I mean, we had a lot of good players, but it's like, how do you practice that throughout the week against somebody else? So, but end of the story is I don't know if it was midway through the first period, it was very obvious what we were doing. And Danny skated by me and was like, "Are you going to follow me around the ice all night long?" And I was like, "Buddy, that's what I was told to do. And I'm trying to stop you." And I don't know exactly what he said. I'm sure it was something really funny, but he ended up still having like 2 goals and an assist that night. Only one was on the power play, so that wasn't my fault, but it was for me personally, it was such a cool challenge, a lot of pressure, but by no means were the coaches like, if he scores, you didn't do your job. But what I had to mentally prepare for throughout that week and for the game, as I look at it, as I get older, was pretty cool, actually. And I think that they do that a lot at the highest levels in other sports specifically. Like I told you, with like football is a great example of it, because it's like, how are we going to shut down Justin Jefferson? Like, there's a way you can do it. I mean, it's almost impossible, but like, it's assignments and it's being mentally prepared on what do they do throughout the game that you can kind of take a handcuffs on, right? And that's what I was trying to figure out when we were doing that throughout the week, is like, I was watching film on him, like, what does he actually do that like separates him, and where do I need to be to like make sure he doesn't have free ice the whole night long? So it was fun.
Do you feel like you got under his skin?
Well, definitely got under his skin. Like I said, I don't know exactly what he said back to me in the first period, but it wasn't hey, Pat, thanks for doing this tonight, but,
Yeah.
and and being the competitor that I am, that made me even happier a little bit and made me like revisualize and focus on that in between periods. Cause obviously I'm sure they made adjustments too. So just making adjustments on top of adjustments. And, let's put it this way. I needed to go right to bed after that game. I was mentally drained after that first Friday night.
So here's my question. Do you feel like you had to be hard to play against then that night? Those
Yeah,
nights?
I think it was hard when you ask that question, and that's a great question because like when I think about being hard to play against, like what does that exactly
Yeah,
mean?
that's where I was going to go next.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like okay, well, be hard to play against. Does that mean I'm cross checking them and hooking them and and finishing every check? Like sure, but that's like 20% of it. It's more like being a mental step ahead of him on where he's trying to go, or like I got to make sure I know exactly where he is on the face-offs, like that type of stuff. Or like if a puck's dumped in and I just take a deep breath 1 second and lose my mind for a second and get out of focus, then he's behind me. You know what I mean? That type of stuff is the being hard. It's almost like being just in his ear all the time, like when he doesn't even know it. So then the puck's not coming to him. I mean, that's the hardest part of like that was more of like how I would define the being hard to play against. Is just every time he got out there, he's like, "Oh, here we go again," and it's like perfect.
Did you chirp him?
I mean, not to start because I was so focused on what I was trying to do, but once he kind of called me out, like I said, midway through the first or whenever it was, like it gave me a little jam, and because I knew it was working then, right? And so I definitely had some words for him, and but yeah, I mean, it was hard for me not to, but then I would like I said before, then I would catch myself losing what I was supposed to be doing, right? And then maybe he flipped it on me, right? And he's just like, "Oh, I got him now." I'm in his head too, so it's that fine line of staying focused but being super into it.
So when you tell your players to be hard to play against, what do you tell them to do?
Well, I think in today's game, it's like you can always say the obvious things, like finishing your checks on the D that are really skilled, But I think the biggest thing that I try to get my guys to do is be where they're supposed to be 90% of the time. You know what I mean? Because if you do that, and that goes from everywhere from like figuring out who's coming up on the other side. Do you know when you're up? Like, because if you have, like who are you matching up with? And we don't do a ton of matching, but if there's a really high end kid, knowing when our guy is going to be out there. Also second layer of it is, okay, like when the faceoff's coming, are you in the right position? Or do you know where you're supposed to be? Like, are you doing what you're supposed to do? And then it kind of snowballs after that. Like, are you supposed to be where you're supposed to be as a third man high? And, all those type of things. But it's more about just the fundamentals of where you're supposed to be in all three zones of the rink consistently, which is so hard for everybody, to be honest with you, to do that because it takes a lot of mental toughness because we all want to get out of where we're supposed to be if we see something like the puck, right? Or if we see, an opportunity, if we see an opportunity to like catch somebody with their head down and finish a check, or if we think we're going to get a breakaway, you just get right on the other side of the check on the wrong side, and then you're playing catch up the rest of the way. So that's what I try to get them to do is just try to be in the right place as much as they possibly can, and then from there they just got to let their abilities take over.
You ever had any players that surprised you and they were so good you couldn't ignore them?
Yeah, I've had a few. When people ask me about those players, it's fun for me to, see, like I said before a few minutes ago, like you could come to a game and be like, oh, this guy's can skate, he can shoot, he's those guys always jump off the ice, but it's the guys that like the ones that, like I said, are in the right place at all time, always win the one-on-one stick battles. Maybe if it's not a physical play, the puck finds their stick. Like people always ask about that, and it's like, that doesn't happen by chance. They're there for the right reasons. So it goes back to the same thing we keep talking about is they all have the ability, but it's just their minds just work at a different level than most people's. They see the game slower. They're in the right place at the right time. And I think what happens then is when you are that person, practice slows down, games slow down. You build way more confidence because you have the puck on your stick at more times, and you make a lot more positive plays. So I've had some guys that when scouts have asked me, the first thing I always tell them is they ask me, what do you think about him? And I'm like, he just thinks the game faster than everybody else. And that's no attribute to me. That's no attribute probably to his parents. It's just, he's blessed with that and he does it and he continues to work on that. And the game slows down for him.
When you look back at your career as a player, as a coach, what have been like the most impactful moments you have had from teammates or players or your own staff?
I mean, some kind of cool stories that I have. So that senior year at the Gophers, we win the first game, and one of my good friends, Jordan Leopold's up for the Hobie Baker that year. We just get done beating Michigan. The place is crazy, obviously. I mean, there's things to do all the time. You're going to dinners, you're going to practice, so on and so forth. And we're in the hotel room after our pregame. I don't know exactly when it was. It must have been pregame skate or something, but that was the night of the Hobie Baker dinner. And I got a hold of Leo and I'm like, do you have your speech ready for the thing? And he's like, I'm not going to win this. And I'm like, buddy, and that's just how people operate, right? Like of course you want it, but you never give yourself as much credit as you deserve. And I'm like, buddy, you better write something down, man, because I got a good feeling about this, And so just those type of things, that was one of the stories. That's just that kind of stuff, just intermingle with people like that behind the scenes. Fast forward to the high school ranks. I really think that, my coaching staff did a really, really good job of, and I circle back to like when we went to the first state tournament appearance, which was 2013. Our coaching staff did a really good job of keeping the belief system going with these kids because they hadn't been there since 2004. And the teams that we had to get through to get there were really good. Not that they're not now, but they always are. And I think our coaching staff did a really good job of internalizing, what was going on within our locker room consistently, our messages, and what we were trying to get the kids to do. And when it happened, it was so cool because it was like, people talk about it all the time, like all your hard work that nobody sees. Like my staff did such a good job of continuing to like plug in the same stuff we're trying to do and like figuring out what the other team's trying to do and just all the stuff behind the scenes. They did such a good job of that. And it was very rewarding, when that type of stuff comes to play and comes to fruition, like I said before, and you actually win the game that meant the most. That was really cool.
One other question about the Gopher year. I remember one of your coaches saying that in between the end of the game and overtime, you guys changed your clothes underneath. Is that true?
A few guys did, yeah. I think that what I vaguely remember from that was hockey players specifically, and I'm sure it's every sport. You're so, regimented in what you do on a daily basis. Like I put my left sock on first, and I put my left skate on first, and I want to be the last person off. That superstitions and all that kind of stuff are so apparent in sports. And I think what happened on that one was that was such a hard thing for some of our guys to wrap their mind around. Like, and the why it happened is because we'd played a full-on long game in a hot rink, and everyone's stuff was probably soaking wet and freezing. You had to go sit back down, and it's like, why don't you guys put some new shirts on underneath or shorts, and stuff. And that was like pulling teeth times 1,000 for guys. Like, no, man, this is what I've been doing my whole entire life. So
did it help?
Apparently, but I think, I think what's funny about that from the coach's perspective, and I haven't had a conversation with any of them about it. But I think what you get into when it comes to and I think it's with parenting as well. It's like, if your kid or player is so set on something that thinks that is going to change the world, how do you change that for them? And how do you convince them no, this is better for whatever reason? Oh, you're going to be on dry clothes, so you're not freezing during the game. And I'm like, I don't care about that, but it's like, This is, you know what I mean? Explaining to them, you don't know everything, but can I help you with this? And you just hope that it works out the right way. Otherwise they're going to be like, you were wrong on that.
Yeah, that's true. I've experienced that as a parent and
exactly.
as a coach. So, well, it was great having you on. I got to tell you, I'm very appreciative of what a strong supporter you've been of what I do. And there's no greater compliment than you sending me kids. And you've sent me quite a few all the way back from that 2012-13 team to fairly recently as well. And then the other thing I would say is, even though I didn't really plan this today, but it just kind of happened, is, I think back to that 2002 year, being at those games, that is one of my core memories with my dad. And, him recently passing away the last couple of years, he had a poster that a lot of you guys signed with his tickets framed. And my mom gave it to me. And it's funny how life works, because I never would have dreamed at that game that I personally know quite a few of you. And I know Bob. The hockey world is such a small, close-knit community. So I just really appreciate, all the ways you've impacted my career and I guess my life, even though we didn't know it at the time.
Yeah. And I appreciate you. Obviously, we've been going through with everything with kids and stuff. And I think that our relationship's grown a lot closer over the last, 5 to 10 years, just from the sheer fact of like getting through the fact of understanding that maybe our kids need help. Maybe I need help. Maybe whoever that is needs help, getting through that stigma and understanding that like, it's okay to, get help on different parts of the game. And, everybody can go squat 500 pounds, but that still might not allow them to be able to come out after a bad shift or whatever the case may be. And on top of that, even more importantly, like if they are actually dealing with something that where hockey is kind of their only outlet, or any sport for that matter, never forgetting what like is the most important thing, just people's mental health and safety and being with their families. And so you can enjoy the game.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate you. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you next or a couple weekends up at the NIT.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you up there. Thanks.
Goodbye.
Yep. Bye.